Good morning, patrons. Welcome to the Q&A video for December. I did not do a Q&A video for November because I only ended up with a couple questions. It was a busy month. Those two questions have relatively short answers, so I just decided to move those two questions to the following month's video in hopes of getting some additional questions. And you guys certainly delivered. We got a bunch of questions that I get to answer this month. I'm also going to be making a separate video this month because there have been some developments in terms of Patreon's payment structure and their fees and stuff like that that I kind of want to address a little bit further. So I'll get into that in a separate video, but for the moment, let me dive in and answer your questions, and we can talk about some stuff. So real quick from last month, Dicers wanted to know, with the pending winter Winterremus season fast approaching, any chance of a mini issue surrounding it? There's a good chance. So right now, obviously, we're in Analog and D-Pad issue 5, and because I'm updating a little bit slower, and I've explained the reason for that already, I expect that to take us all the way through December and right into January. So chances are what's going to end up happening is we're going to end Analog and D-Pad issue 5 sometime in January and just get right into a little mini storyline involving Winterremus, because now that we're getting back into the swing of the Ethan and Lucas stuff, and you know, they're becoming more and more prevalent, you know, not only in Patreon but also on the main website, and because Winterremus does exist in their new continuity, although, you know, Ethan wasn't necessarily the creator of it, he's not the king of it, but it is a holiday that's celebrated in this world. So that is something I want to continue to celebrate within the comic and sort of bring back into the regular rotation. So it is currently my goal. Like I said, it's just going to depend on when issue 5 ends in January. So next we have a question from Bruno, and Bruno asks, what was the inspiration for the limited edition Samus poster with the French writing on it? That was you know, the wallpaper for last month, and then or sorry, 2 months ago, and then, you know, I did offer it as a poster. So the inspiration behind that poster was actually there's a style of art and poster called, and bear with me here because I took Spanish in high school, so I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation, but there's a style called Belle Époque, which is French for beautiful era, and it's sort of a style that came about around the turn of the century, the 20th century, you know, and had this kind of very sort of distinct look to it. There are certain symbols that are kind of indicative of this era, like the Moulin Rouge and other things, and you can find a lot of posters of that, of a similar kind of type, and they mostly you know, feature, you know, somewhat abstract art, almost a little bit Art Deco-ish maybe, bold lettering. You know, usually you know, you saw it a lot for advertisements, posters for wines or restaurants or shows or stuff like that. So I wanted to create a piece of artwork that conceivably you could hang on the wall, and at a glance it would almost look like something antique or classy, but if you look closer and you realize, wait a minute, that's actually like a video game character. And so a lot of these posters featured, you know, beautiful women and kind of, you know, elegance. And so when I think of strong, beautiful woman in video games, and you know, I immediately think of Samus, and so that's kind of how that came about. I thought it would just be a neat kind of combination of the two things. All right, we have a question from Michael. Michael says, you did a strip not so long ago about telling your son how guns are bad. How are you planning to teach your kids the skill to balance kind of nerdy hobbies like TV and gaming, etc., with healthy hobbies like sports and outside play and stuff like that? Well, Michael, that's something that we are kind of learning as we go along. You know, Flynn just turned 4 this week, and you know, Weston's only 18 months, so you know, we're hardly experts in the matter. It's something we're kind of you know, as we go along, we're kind of feeling out boundaries and figuring out what works. And you know, you also have to tailor to the child, because every child has a different personality and reacts differently to certain things. You know, in general though, I feel like it's mostly about balance and moderation in all things. So right now, we typically let our kids watch a little bit of TV first thing in the morning, you know, and that works out for everybody, because you know, me and or my wife, we're just getting up, we want to have our coffee and kind of sit and wake up, and you know, so the kids get to watch maybe an hour or so of television in the morning while we have breakfast and that sort of thing, and then that's pretty much it for screen time for the rest of the day. In the evenings, occasionally we will either have a family movie night, or After Weston goes to bed, we'll play a video game with Flynn because he's just kind of starting to get into video gaming. We've just started introducing him to that, stuff that we can do together. So like we were playing Mario Odyssey together. We played a little bit of the Lego Marvel games together. And right now, Flynn's big into Skylanders, so we just started for his birthday. He got Trap Team and some Skylander stuff, and so maybe for a half an hour before bed he'll get to play a little bit. But really, it just comes down to at no point are we going to let him just kind of like veg out in front of the TV for hours on end. And that's kind of been our mindset from the get-go. So I mean, he sort of knows, like he gets watch a little bit of TV in the morning, and then in the evenings maybe a little bit more on, but not as a given, not as like we finish dinner and he gets to go turn on the TV. That's not always the case. So I think for starters, I mean, at least at this age, not just letting them have free reign of screens is a big step in encouraging them to do other things. If you don't let them know, I think that just vegging out in front of the TV all day is even a possibility, then they're not going to really know that they're missing out on it. But like I said, I mean, we're learning as we go, and it's about moderation and finding a balance, because I do want him to be able to enjoy that stuff, but at the same time, yeah, I want to encourage him to play with his toys and build with his blocks and Legos. And I think that both are important. I think that the stuff that he watches on TV helps inform and feed his imagination, because there's stuff that he can watch on certain shows that he wouldn't see anywhere else. And so it kind of expands his imagination, so he can take what he's seen and some of the concepts he's seen, and then he can apply that to his creative play, or playing with toys and stuff like that, or outside making up games, that sort of thing. So I think it's all important, but you're right, it's a tough balancing act, especially since sometimes as a parent you're just so tired, all you want to do is just kind of like sit down and relax and be like, whatever, just go occupy yourself. So I think it's an easy trap to fall into, where, the easiest thing to do is just like click on the TV and occupy them while you kind of recuperate a little bit. But yeah, honestly, long term, your guess is as good as mine, and I don't think that there's any one right way to do this, and there's no one size fits all method either. All right, next we have a question from Bob, who asks, if you could tell yourself 10 years ago something about gaming, what would it be? 10 years ago, I guess I would probably tell myself, you're never going to get another Knights of the Old Republic, so you may as well start getting used to that now. All right, Bram asks a question in the form of a very long paragraph, so I'm actually going to try and paraphrase his question a little bit here. The gist of it is basically he says that because he's a patron and he gets the comics to basically delivered to his email, that he doesn't end up going to the website quite as often, which is understandable. But as a result, he misses out on some blog posts and other little things. And he asks, if I had considered any way to sort of bring that full experience to Patreon, with the posts, news posts, blog posts, whatever. And the answer to that is yes, I have considered that, and especially now in light of some of the fee changes that Patreon just announced, I am going to definitely have to take a look at the way I'm running Patreon and the website, and how I can bring more value to the patron, pledge levels and that sort of thing. And I'll go into that a little bit further in this other video I want to do. But basically, yeah, it is something that I'm aware of, that occasionally the blog posts are important to the comic, and that those should end up on Patreon as well with the comics. And so it's something I am going to be looking at. Steven asks, with Monster Hunter World coming out very soon, what are my thoughts on Dauntless, which is another kind of Monster Hunter-y type of game? Well, Steven, I can tell you that I've been a fan of Monster Hunter for many, many years, and I'm a bit of a purist, so given the choice between the two, I'm going to head towards Monster Hunter. But with that said, I mean, I like that type of game as a whole, so if there's going to be more of that type of experience out there, I'm not going to argue against that. I mean, especially if Dauntless manages to, even bring something a little bit different to the table. I certainly think that there's room for both. Whether or not I actually have time to play both will, just again depend a lot on, when they come out and what sort of sticking power they have and that sort of thing. But I was more excited about Dauntless before we knew Monster Hunter World was going to be a thing. Now I kind of feel like Dauntless is maybe like the fallback plan, in the event that for some reason they royally screw up Monster Hunter World. And finally this month, Trip asks us a pretty heavy question here. Looking back on your journey of becoming a webcomic creator and a web entrepreneur, is there anything you would have or should have done differently? Most certainly. I mean, of course, there were, if hindsight's 2020 and all that, and, I could magically go change things. I mean, there are certainly things I'd do differently. I would buy 1,000 bitcoins back in 2013, and you know what I mean. I mean, I guess if there's something, if I'm going to just off the top of my head find something that would have maybe made my journey a little bit easier or something like that, it would have been taking more time to learn the web development side of things, because as it is, like, I made my first website, I cobbled it together, but that was like back when it was like just strictly HTML, and there was, it was very rough and kind of bulky and whatever, and then I had somebody else do it for me, and I've been reliant on other people for that side of things ever since, like the hosting and the website maintenance and website design and all that stuff. That's not something I'm fluent in, and so I have to rely on other people. And it would just be easier and more efficient, both financially and, time-wise, if I could do all that stuff myself. So that might be something that I would change. But again, that's such a tough question, because I mean, that's one of those things where, like, you go back and change one thing and this other thing might not happen. You might cancel out a negative, but you might also cancel out a positive, and the butterfly effect and all that stuff. So I'm always a little bit hesitant to pinpoint things that I should have done differently or would change if I could magically do that. Just because I tend not to dwell too much on regret and that sort of thing if I can. Anyway, so that wraps it up for December's Q&A video. Thank you so much for the questions, and keep an eye out. Like I said, I'm going to do another video because I think we have more to talk about in terms of, changes that are happening at Patron and what that means for us and me and you. But all that aside, thank you guys so much for being my patrons and offering me your support on a monthly basis. And what's most important to me is that you know that I appreciate it. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you next month.